All right, today we're going to cover how to take an asset, whatever geometry is, and bring that into USD, create variants from that, both variants of models. We're going to create variants on our materials and material assignments, and then we're going to learn how to utilize that with a simple scatter system, leveraging those different pieces of those variants. So get ready, and let's dig in and do some Houdini magic. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start from similar to where we left off last week, which is we've made an asset. It's inside of sops, and now we want to bring this into LOPS and be able to render this through Karma in the USD workflow. So we jump inside, and we've got a basic tree set up here. We've gone through and I've used the Atlas splitter, and I've made my leaves, and so we've got our nice little tree set up. So to get this into LOPS, the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to put down a couple nulls. So this null is I'm going to call this high. I'm going to put down this null and call it proxy. Okay, and these will be what I pull in, because one of this gives me my geometry, and the second gives me these great curves, right? And I can use that as my viewport display. So to prep this, I'm going to go ahead and do a group delete, because I don't really need all these groups that it generates. I may need those as I make my instances, or my other levels of detail, but I don't need it now. So I'm going to go ahead and do this on both. And you'll see that there's a ton of attributes on these that I really don't need. So I'm going to put down an attribute delete. And I'm going to tell us to delete non-selected. And for this, I don't know that I care much about any of these point attributes at all. I do want to keep my normals. I do want to keep, if there's UVs on this, I'll want to keep my UVs, which I wonder is texture in here on the points. There's a UV blend, UV distance. We've lost our UVs somehow, so we'll have to go back and look at that and figure out where those went. We'll keep the name attribute. And that's it. Look at all these things stuffed in the details. Something happened in their tool set to do some crazy stuff. So now we should have something nice and pretty clean. There you go. And there's that. And then I'll put another attribute delete over here. And this time I want to keep the color. I'll keep the normals. And these should be ready to go. Now if I take a look here, I can see that I have pretty clean attribute, or pretty clean geometry to pull across. I don't want to carry all that extra data. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and jump back out to our stage, and I'm going to drop down to SOP import node, and let's go and point this at our high. So that's going to come in. There's our high geo, which is great. We can see here we've got these different meshes because those are from the name attribute, right? So we have this mesh 0, which is kind of all of our wood. And then we have piece 0, 1, 2, and 3. Those are our different leaf types. So we could probably name these to clean this up and make it a little bit easier if we want to. Organization is always really key here. I don't think I need individual shaders per leaf type. I'm going to go ahead and just I'm going to condense these into one mesh, and then we'll work on renaming everything here. So right now this comes under SOP import because this import path prefix is $OS. This is the name of the node, SOP import. I can either name this and let that pick that up, or we can just specify. So in this case, I'm just going to specify, and I'm going to call this geo. So it's going to come in under this geo node. And I'm going to grab another one of these and paste. And for this one, we'll put in the proxy. We'll see here that comes in, and that actually works pretty well for using that as our display. And you see it's curve 0. And right now, because we copy and paste this is coming in under geo as well. So if we just drop these together like this, you'll see we have curve and all of our meshes, and it's all in one, which is great. Let's go clean up the names a little bit, shall we? So we're going to come in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a name node, and I'm just going to grab based on a certain attribute. So we see we have this name, so we'll say at piece 0, I'll give it a star, and we'll make the name leaf. And I use leaf even though these are pine needles, because I don't care what type of tree it is. A leaf, pine needle is just a leaf. So everything would always be leaf and maybe wood, right? So you're consistent. Okay. So then with this one, we will grab for our group. Let's hold on to one more attribute here to help us. We'll hold on to the tag attribute, and I think that'll give us the ability to grab this tag trunk, and we'll call this wood, although that doesn't give us our branches, which we're kind of missing. I guess we could have deleted our groups after this, so let's do this. Let's move this group delete down, and instead of using an attribute to drive that, we can come in and we can say all branches, and we can say trunk. And just to make sure they get captured, trunk cap and branch caps, I believe those are still included in those other groups, but now that should give us something that'll help. So if we come down here, we can see that since we didn't use the tag, we're going to get rid of that tag. So we have our two names. We're still missing our UVs. We'll come back to that, and we have our points. Now, with our proxy here, I don't really need to do anything special with this, but one of the things I would want to do is I would want to drop down a color node, and I'm going to do it above my deletion. That way it gives me a little bit of a ability to utilize that before I delete stuff. But I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to say all branches and leaf, whatever those are, and we're just going to make these like a dark green color. And there, so now it's, it's not those kind of crazy colors. And, looking at this, our proxy is 5,000 polygons. That's probably a little high. I want that to be even lower. So after that, I can either use a poly reduce, or I can just delete some of those groups. So we can use a poly reduce and say maybe 10%. And let's see what that does. That might not do anything because they're lines. It doesn't like them. Okay. Not going to help us there. So we will use, we're just going to do a blast node. And we'll do it up here before we go into that group delete. And we're going to blast, let's blast out those tiniest of branches. Let's blast out the next level. See, we're still good. And let's blast out branch 1. And I think that still does the trick. And now as far as polygons, we've cut that down a good amount. So we could go through and say, great, let's, reduce the number of points just by putting on a resample. And that might actually been a better way to do this. A resample node, let's test which one looks better. So that got more. Let's make this value of 1. Oh, because it's the number of points, which is fine. That's actually fine. If we look at this, this is 47,000 points, and then this becomes 11,000 points. So maybe it's a combination of the both. Reducing this way down. Oh, I got mad. Yeah, maybe something like that. 5,000 polys, but way less points. And let's take a look at this blast here. Right, so that, this really kind of takes the cake as far as that goes, and I think this gives me enough of what I'm looking for. So you can see here there's various ways to do everything, and you're just trying to think about what's my end goal, what's my purpose. So I think I like that the best. So now if we jump back out to our stage and take a look, I now have, if I select this, I now have my leaf, my wood, my curve 0. Let's go fix that name before we move on. So I'm going to put down a name, and we'll call this name proxy. Sure, that works. Maybe we'll call this, maybe it's all capital proxy. Now, one of the things is I want to kind of take all this other geo and put it underneath one transform, because we saw before that the proxy lived next to the individual mesh components. But if I want to do a transform, I want to be able to transform kind of both of those together, which ideally I guess you would do the transform on the geo level, but just for cleanness and have it be able to look nice, I'm going to go ahead and put down a I'm going to do an attribute wrangle here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our string at name and we're going to say equal, and we're going to join it with render, and we'll say plus, and then we'll say at name. So what we see here now is we should have on the primitives, our name now changed to look like this. Before it was here, and now we've modified it to look like that. So when we come back over here and we take a look, we should now have, oh, it popped us out of geo. Why did it do that? But this is what I was looking for it to do, but I expected it to do it under this geo. So let's take a look at how so down under the geometry handling, I believe it is. No, it's going to be under import data. No, primitive definition. There's this path attribute. That didn't fix it. That's strange. Okay. All right, so it was a very simple thing. So before we had this as a slash, we're telling it the root level that we want this to go under. But if we just omit this leading slash like that, then it will append this after this geo. So then we end up with geo, render, leaf, and wood, and then so then we have proxy and render right next to each other. So this is more the organization that I was looking to have. So now I'm going to put down a configure primitive node. I'm going to do 2 of these. And the first one is we'll drop this on proxy, and we're going to change its purpose to be proxy. And what that means is it'll only display in the viewport, it won't render. And then I'm going to copy and paste this, and we will drop this on render, and we'll make its render. So this won't draw in the viewport, it will only render. So it takes a little bit of opening and closing stuff, and eventually this kind of pops back. It'll pop back to the proper definition. Right now it's still showing everything, but it'll straighten itself out. We'll just give it a minute. All right, so we've got the basics here set up of how this is going to come in and how it's going to create itself. So to start creating an asset, we're going to use the component builder. And this is Houdini's kind of little pre-pipeline setup, and I know we've talked about this before. It's pretty easy and nifty to use. This is where we're going to transition where we've been bringing this in to kind of test things. Now we're going to come back over to here, and this is going to do some of that stuff for us under the hood. So this is going to be an object merge. And so we're going to come back here and go grab our high, and we'll plug our high into that required output. And then we're going to grab this and say paste, and we're going to grab our proxy, and plug that in. So now if we come back out to stage, we can look at this, and you'll see that this is already doing the right thing. It loads up under asset geo, we have proxy, and we have render. Fascinating that that made it another scope. So did that. So we actually changed this to bring this back out. But again, the reason I was showing you this is because this is doing the same thing that this configure primitive node is doing. So if we come over here to our component, we look at our proxy, we can see that it has this computed purpose as proxy. We can see our render geo has a computed purpose of render. So it's doing this same thing. So that way we understand what is this doing under the hood? If we come up a level, you know, there's a whole bunch of USD stuff that it's doing under here, and we want to understand why and what that's doing in order to make this, you know, so it's not just super black box. Okay, so I'm going to actually pin this so I can kind of see this in real time, and I'm going to come back to my fur here, and what I can see here is I don't need this extra scope, so we're just going to get rid of that node. So now this all comes in and it's a little cleaner, which is what I'm looking for. Okay, so once this is done, you know, this is going to write out to the place that we want it. This is going to use our node name here. We can see the file where this is going to write this. I don't love this being this component output 1. We can see that the file name is, you know, grabbing from this name, and this name is grabbing this. So we can change this right here, because this is, instead of using that, we can come in and say, great, we want you to be named, let's see, what is this? Value to comp output 1. So I'll just give this a specified name. So I'm going to call this fur. And now this is going to write this to that fur directory. So, okay. So now we want to go through, and I want to actually make some different LODs to be able to have this render at different qualities, because I really don't need all that full resolution unless we're a lot further away. So I'm going to delete this here. I'm going to jump back into my object and in my fur here, and let's start looking at how can we make this lighter weight. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use a split node. I'm going to make a medium and a low. So in this case, I'm going to just split out my trunk, and really just the main branches are all that I want for this. And I'm going to go ahead and now do another split, or I can use a blast either way, because I really just only need the one thing. So I'm going to use a blast for this second one, which is kind of like splitting things out. And we'll grab the leaf group here, and we're going to delete non-selected, and so it leaves us with just this leaf. And so this right here, if we look at the amount of geometry this is generating, that's over 1 million points, over 1 million polys. So we want to clean this up. So we're going to use a VDB from polygons. And already that looks pretty decent. And then I'm going to drop down a convert VDB node, and we'll convert this back into polygons. And so already there, so this now is like a leaf bag, and we'll see that we're drastically less. We've cut down our footprint quite a bit. We can use adaptivity to clean that up even further, so it'll try to find areas where it can reduce the number of polygons that we're using. So we can look at that. So we're down to 94,000 points, which is great. Usually what I'll do is I'll do a clean after this, so that way we can make sure we're cleaning up any degenerative polygons that created. And then I'll often put a fuse on here as well, because it'll help to just close up any holes, make sure it stays watertight. So there, now we've got a leaf bag that represents kind of that middle range. So with this, we could try to UV map this so we can put a texture on it, but I'm actually just going to use triplanar projections to put my textures on this and get something that I think will look all right. So again, it's going to be seen from this distance. A simple color may be enough, but we'll load it in with a low res texture and see if that helps us get anything more. And then I'm just going to go ahead and merge these back together. All right, so I'll do a merge here and a merge there. And there's my new tree. Right, we can look at, that's fine. It's 121,000 polygons versus we were at 1 million. So this is a great reduction here. Now we want to do the same things here. We're going to do our attribute delete, and we're just going to keep the selected, so we don't care about color. I think we lost our UVs. We still have to look into that. And I really don't care about any of the rest of this stuff. We'll just keep the normals off of that. And then we'll see here that we have far less. We just have the name, and the name on this is going to be like density. So we're going to change both of those anyway. So we're going to do name. And for this one, the name's going to be wood. And copy and paste. And the name for this one is going to be leaf. And then we're going to put a null. And we'll call this medium. So now let's pop back out to our stage, and how do we incorporate this into this setup? So to bring this in, I'm just going to copy my geometry node here. And I'm going to come inside, and obviously I want this to point at my low, or my medium, sorry. But I'm going to go ahead and leave our proxy as our curves, because that's really fine just to be the same thing. I mean, I could come in and for this, you know, I could decimate this even more, right? If I wanted to get rid of some of that, you know, a few other polygons or whatever, but it's pretty lightweight. So now how do we merge this? So we're going to use component geometry variant node, and we'll plug this one in first, and we'll plug this one in second. And our geo, this is going to be a geo. You could make this model, look dev, and I'm going to keep this based on what like the department names would be, so model. And so now we should have we can do a set variant. And we can choose our model variant, and then we can see we have these different names. Now these names are ugly. We don't want those names, so how do we fix that? So we'll set this to manual. So instead of OS and then input, some of the other ones had a better way of doing this. Source mode inputs number. This is where ideally we're able to pull something off of the geometry itself that we're bringing in. So let me quickly figure this out. Okay, so I remember here, we can leave this as inputs. There's actually a control here on our objects coming in where we can give this a variant name. So the geo variant name is going to be, in this case, will be high. The geo variant name here is going to be medium. And then I think with that, we then have to keep that as, oh, there you go. So that works. So now we have our high variant, right? So we'll see this when we render through XPU. We'll see that this is our high. There we go. So that's all our high. Awesome. And then if we switch this on to our medium, we can see that brings in our medium, right? Which rendered way faster. And when we're, you know, at this distance, that's going to work. That's going to work great. Okay, so now we just move this plug in here. We can keep this set to make this what, so this will load eventually as, it'll still contain our variant information, but it'll give us our kind of default that we want this to load in initially. So it always kind of comes in. So then once we have this, now we need to set this up so that way we can have some difference in materials between those two versus the just kind of one material, because the leaf material is going to be different on these two different proxies. Okay, so let's build some quick materials here. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to put down a material builder. So material X builder. And I'm going to copy and paste this. And so we're going to have MTLX wood underscore leaf, and we'll have leaf high. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to start by putting down, because we've gone through this before of how to set this up. So I'm just going to do pretty simple setup. I'm going to use the the triplanar projection texture for this. And what I like to do is I'm just going to say copy parameter, paste relative reference into these two. So I only have to do this once, and then I'll copy this whole node. And now we'll jump out. I've got some things already kind of pre-downloaded. All right, so I'm just going to come up here to where I keep my stuff. All right, so we're going to come into Megascan library, downloaded, and again, I'm just going to grab a few things just to be quick here. We're going to come through, and I think down here there is a wood, not veneer, plank, other, tree bark. So we'll just use this first tree bark, and 2K is going to be fine. We're never going to be up close to this, so we'll just grab this, say accept, and we'll plug this into our base color. So this is just going to help us kind of get that beginning of a setup here. So I'm going to go ahead and for my position here, I want to use a position node, and then I'm going to use a multiply, and this will allow me to control the scale of my triplanar projection. All right. And then really I can just copy this and paste it into these others. For the leaf, this will work, but then for our leaf high, I actually want to use a regular image node because this is going to utilize our UVs. And so put this into base color, and let's go get that. So this one, there was a, this is under atlases, and it should be under tree needle. I'm pretty sure it's this first one. We'll take a preview of that just to make sure. All right, so there we go. So here's our, this was what we built our things, our leaf atlases off of, so it's great. So we're gonna go ahead and select that and say accept. We'll do a second one here for our opacity. And we'll plug that into, come on. Okay, so now we have our basic kind of setup. Other than on this leaf, I don't want to use wood. I'm going to go and actually use grass. I'm going to use one of these because it'll read like a leaf bag texture. It'll just be kind of some general color with just some variance in it is all I'm looking for. So something like that. Not quite. That's like a clovery kind of thing. So that was that first grass. Let's look at this one. Okay, this one might work. This is a little better. Not my favorite. I think there are better ones out there. So let's just check one more because that oil one, the oil PT0, looks like it might work. I don't really want 8K. I can come back later and make a low res version of that, but well, let's take a look. Yeah, this is really just the same thing. So we're going to use the other. All right, so we're going to come up a level. It was this, not this one. It was 0.0. It's 4K. Again, same thing. I'll probably come back in here and make a lower res version of that. But that'll be our grass. So this should give us now kind of the setup we want. I'll probably have to come in here and change the multiply on this to get this to lay out right, but let's take a look. So now, once we have this, we're going to come in and we want to tell it what we want to assign to. So in this case, you know, we made our variant set model. Materials is not usually a department. This is going to be, I'm going to call this look dev because that's usually what you call the, at least in visual effects, what you call the department that handles putting materials onto things. So with this done, we can select which variant we want to apply this to. In order to, because right now that's giving it this comp 1, you know, whatever, it's not what we want. So we want this to be high. And so we'll go ahead and, oh wait, we're working on the medium low. So we'll call this medium low, which is what we called the other, right? Let's just make sure we have this coming in. Oh, medium. Oh, no. So we have medium for the, and we'll have a low for the geometry, but we're going to just combine those two to be the same, use the same look dev, right? So medium low will be this one, which is what we want. So the primitives here that we want to make an adjustment for, we're going to drop this material here and be material wood. And then for our actual material we want to use is wood. Say okay. And then we'll add another one of these, and our primitive for this is going to be leaf. And then we're going to grab that, in this case, just the regular leaf, because this is our medium low, and we'll say okay. So now if we zoom in on this, we can see that there's some textures being applied, right? Like our wood texture there, our projected texture. You could probably argue that that's not awesome, but you know what? We're gonna run with it for right now. And everything here is way too shiny. So we'd go through and do a standard look dev. I'm not going to go through that now of how to look dev this asset, because it's just basically building up a shader, the displacement, and everything, and getting that right. For now, we just want to get our different pieces working. So now the next step with this is we want to go ahead and we want to put a similar setup here. So we're going to go ahead and put a component material node. And now for this one, we're going to set our variant. And so we're going to grab this. I believe it's on the asset is where this lives. Oh, there you go. It's all in there. So we'll change our model to high. So we're going to change here. And right now it's using that projected material, but that's not what we want. We want to create under our look dev, we want to create our high variant. And so for this, we're going to use our wood, and I don't know, let's do a test. I don't know that we need to do both. Maybe we're just overriding the one. Let's see here. Leave high. So it didn't pick up our shader there, but it did grab our leaf shader, which is great. So now we can put that wood on here, and we can go grab our wood material. And so then that applied. So now there you can see we have, when we zoom in here, we've got our texture on there. Oh, it looks like we're missing our UVs from our leaves, right? So we've kind of lost our UV attribute. So we can clean that up and fix it, but it's applying that whole entire map to the individual faces. So, but there. So now we have this setup here where we have, we have this ability to come in and do our set variants and change, to mix and match these different variations and use them in our scatter. So this is the first step. So the last thing I'm going to do really quickly here, because I'm not going to finish out the component, let's go and figure out what is happening to our UVs and see if we can save those. So let's take a look. All right, so looking here, we have this UV blend, UV smooth. Oh, this is the wrong thing. This is coming off of this. So coming down here, this is where, why are we losing that? We should have UVs. Oh, we don't. So our leaf generator here is stripping the UVs off of all of our stuff, which is not fun. So let's see if we can fix that. So let's take a look and see if there's a setting in here that's causing that. All right, so in looking at this real quick, here's a thing that can happen inside of Houdini. If we take a look here, we have a UV attribute, but it's a point attribute. And then if we look here, we have a UV attribute, right? But it is a vertex attribute. So because of that mismatch, then when you put these things together, it can often cause kind of collisions. So we're going to do an attribute promote, and we're going to take our UVs and move them to our vertex, which is, you can have it on either, but that's a little more standard, is to have them run on your vertex as a vertex attribute, because you can have each point, like each polygon can share points with its neighbor polygon, but it can have its own unique UVs. So you can get better information. So now we'll take a look at that. And now for the info tag, we now have our UVs. So now we can come back here, and on our vertex attribute, we have UVs. So we can preserve those. Again, we don't care about for the medium. We come back out to our stage. And that rendered, and you can already see that difference, right? So we zoom in, we can see that it's mapping much better to that. So I'm happy with that. Obviously, shading wise, this has got a long ways to go, but there's a tree. I mean, at that distance, even that works pretty good, minus these big hotspots. So the last thing that I want to do is I want to add a low to this, so I can go through and set this up. So really, it's just going to be kind of a copy of this, and we'll call this low, and then I'm going to use a poly reduce on my branches here, right? So if we look at this, 7,000 polys, right? I think I can reduce this even more. I'm going to go ahead and do a blast, and I'm going to get rid of everything but the trunk, right? So I'm going to do trunk, and I'm going to delete non-selected, so that becomes like this. We'll use a poly reduce, and we'll just start reducing there. Awesome. So that's nice and low. Let's make it 10, a nice even number. That looks perfect. So we're now down to 47 polygons. So what does 5 give us? 5's even better, right? That might be a little low. So let's do 10. And what I'll do now is I'll do an attribute transfer. Because if we were to look at the normals for this, right? So if you were to calculate the normals on here and look at this, so there's proper normals, but you're going to get some hard faces in there. And we could come in here and just blur this. That's probably the easiest way. The other thing you could do is, if you had specific normals that you wanted to keep, you could transfer those based on position from the original model onto the new model. So this should work. So we have nice soft normals there. We probably should have done some new normals everywhere else. Do we have normals here as we're working with? Good. We've got good normals. So this becomes our new trunk, right? Our new wood. And then now over here for our leaf bag, I don't need nearly this much detail. And so for our VDB from polygons, I'm going to change this to like 5. And that looks pretty good, right? So we now have 2,000 some odd polygons versus we were at, I think, 30,000 or something, 113. So this is a much lower resolution version. So, and that becomes our low. And now I can kick this out, come back to my stage, and I can just add another one here. So I'll copy and paste this, and this is going to be low. And instead of going inside and using this internally, I can also point to it directly. Instead of going inside and doing that, I can just do the same thing, except instead of an internal sop, we'll use external sop, and our default render will come out here and we'll grab low. For our proxy, we're going to come out here and we'll grab proxy, and we're going to say accept. And now we've done essentially the same thing as using the internal, but it's just all up here, so it's a little clearer as to what we're doing. So in this case, we should now have another variant, and we do. It's low. We're going to turn off this set variant, and there's our low. And so on this, again, now we would use a set variant because you're going to have to kind of always make sure that you're matching these up. Look dev, medium low. And there you go. So now we've got our grass texture on there. This one gives us kind of a good look at what that's doing, right? And that kind of looks like pine needles. That's why we do it. That grass texture works pretty good. Looking at this, you can see how polygonal that is. I probably want to do the same kind of gag. I'm going to pin this and come into my object here, and we'll do this same normals gag. Just drop that in there, and that should give us a little bit softer of a look, not quite so hard-edged. I don't know if it's necessarily better, but my hope is with that is you'll get, because really there should be light shining through this and backlighting. This isn't perfect, but for really far away, it's going to do the trick. So we'll call that good. The last thing would be is if I wanted to create a snow variant. You can see here that we can build all kinds of details into this. So like we could make a variant on this that is snow and change the shaders, and we can add additional pieces of geo that represent the snow, and then that we can use as we pull into the scatter. So let's take a look at how we can now use this. I'm gonna stop at this point for these purposes because, well, let's just do this. Let's make snow, and we'll add some snow real quick. So I'm going to take this output, right, which is here. All right, so snow, when you get snow on trees, for the most part, you get kind of a buildup on top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this leaf bag, and I want to isolate the areas that are, kind of facing up to kind of figure out like, okay, well, where would snow build up on this? So usually what I'll do is you could create an attribute. We'll use an attribute VOP so we can kind of see what we're doing as we play with this. So the simplest thing to do is to come in and we'll, off of the normals pass here, we're going to go ahead and do a vector to float. And this will allow us to access this, the Y. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to say fit. And so we'll take this Y, we'll put that into the value, and let's plug this into the CD for right now. So you can see here that it's saying -1 to +1, and and so this is getting clamped at 0. But we can come and pull down on this a little bit and pull up on this, so we can kind of really just isolate those areas that we want to get. So this is where we're going to start to build our system. So from this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a we'll instead of doing this in CD, so now I'm going to go ahead and do a bind export. And I'm going to send this out to be a new surface attribute. So in this case, I'm going to call it density. So now if I come out and I use a scatter sop and tell it to use density, it's only going to generate those based on where we are. So we can put down like a merge node to kind of visualize where these are. All right, so we can see here we're not getting them on the underside, we're only getting them on the above. So and then how many, right, we can increase this and kind of really cover that. So the next thing that we could do is we could do a VDB from points, from particles, and now we're able to kind of start building out what this snow is going to look like. We don't adjust that. So we can use this point radius to multiply down those points, or we can come in and either add p-scale as an attribute here, so an attribute create, right? We'll come here and we'll say p-scale, and we'll make the value 0.1. This is, oops, there we go. So this is like clipping those out. So here we're getting those values. So we can then come in, and if this is becoming too sparse, because we're going to eventually do a convert VDB back out to geometry, right? So this becomes like our snow cover on top. So now if we look at this, on top of this, so we're going to do a color node here. We'll make this green. Right, something like that. So now we can see we've got some snow on there. And so maybe this is what you want, and we can make as many variations of this as we want, which is cool. Or maybe we want there to be a little bit more than this. So this is where we can come in on this P scale and start, you know, playing with this, and this will thicken up that snow. Obviously that looks a little cartoony, but from a distance like this, you know, that looks okay, right? So, you know, that's believable. And, you know, we can do things with this SDF, right? We can use I think there's a sharpen, volume sharpen. Is there VDB sharpen? VDB reshape. We can use the dilate. So usually what I'll do is I'll like dilate it up, and then I'll dilate it back down, or I'll rotate it back down by the same value. And so, you know, if you look at this without these two, it looks like that. But then by doing this, you kind of just get a little bit more of an kind of an organic feeling, you know. So maybe we dilate it up more, and then erode it back more than we dialed up. So now that's starting to look like something that feels more like snow. And again, we can just come back in here and play with this P scale until we get something that feels right. So that to me now starts to feel like how snow would feel. Now there's a weirdness that it's in the center of the tree, and we can write other tools to like remove the points from the middle there. We could do it as simply as if we wanted to use like a tube, and we could say group, and we could say polygon or points. We'll call this remove. So we'll just take this tube now, and you know, we can take a look at the controls here. We can just, you know, manually do this. There's ways that you could, you know, enter this in, you know, by taking it off of, you know, the size of something. It'll automatically size it, but we'll just go something like this, and we'll take our bottom here and maybe open it up a little bit. Oh, not that one. We're gonna make this one 0, and we'll make this one 2, maybe 3. Let's try 4. Now if we take a look at our points, we'll turn off this enable here, and we'll go by bounding regions and say object. So now it's just going to select those points that are in the center, and now we can put a blast node down, and we can remove that group. So that'll color those out, and so then that gives us something that looks like this, where now there's you know, it doesn't go all the way into the center of the tree, which, you know, feels a little more realistic. It doesn't really matter probably at those distances. It will save us a little bit on geometry, which is kind of nice. You know, so you can see here, you can just kind of pull that out, and you get something that's just a little bit less. So you get just kind of like a hint of the snow on those trees. So, and then, you know, from there, you could do all kinds of things to, you know, kind of push that out. And again, I think the easiest and from this distance is really just to control that P scale. You know, maybe it's 5. Oh, no, it's not 5. 3.3. You know, something like that. Where, you know, once you get to this, then it's using this, you know, this erode, you know, back in, where we can kind of, you know, just keep kind of pulling this, where you're trying to get that natural shape, and this is kind of doing interesting things, in my opinion, to get there. So again, there's no right or wrong here, just trying to find something that feels interesting. So I think that would be it for me. Now, what I want out of this is I don't care about taking the leaf bag. I really just want, I'm going to do output, sorry, null, and I'm going to call this snow. And we would probably need to do this same thing, right? It'd be interesting to see kind of how this looks over here off of our low tree, right? Still kind of works. You could use something like that, but maybe, you know, for the low tree, you want, you know, something else, you know, for the low tree, you know, maybe you, oops, maybe you want, you know, just a different look. So we could just take this whole setup here, right? Copy and paste it over and plug this into our low. And there, that feels more connected to that tree shape-wise, you know, a little bit better. And then from there, we could probably go and make an adjustment, you know, as to where we want it to, you know, pull that off. We can allow this to kind of use a little bit more of that tree to kind of grow that snow. So, you know, something probably like that. So now you look at both of these and how much geo we created. You know, if we look at the info tab here, you know, it's another 95,000 polygons. I think that's more than is in this low tree by a long shot. Our tree is super low. So once we've done this, there's a couple things we can do. We can crank up that adaptivity. You can see it creates some problems there on the geo. We'll want to clean that up. Or we could just simply do either a poly reduce is one method that we could use, right? And we can just reduce how many polygons we keep. So, you know, keep 2% of our polygons. And that's probably perfect there. And then we'll do the same kind of normal, and we'll just crank the cusp angle on that. And there you go. There's our snow low. And then this could be snow, you know, medium. And then really we could build another one of these for the high if we wanted to, you know, so that way we could have some high-res stuff. For now, I'm not going to worry about this. I'm only going to have snow on my kind of higher up elevations, so I really only need it for this background stuff. But I really want to do this kind of same gag here for this side. Or actually, maybe we'll use different. We'll use the remesher in order to do this. Be aware that the remesher's default target is pretty small, so it makes really high-res stuff. So we're going to change this to 3. Let's take a look at what that does. All right, so we lost most of our stuff. All right, let's try a poly reduce. So we'll do poly reduce, and that other one we did 2, so we'll keep this at 10. And let's see how that looks. That's probably better. I mean, the remesh, the reality is we can make this remesh work. It's just a matter of getting the distance to be right, you know, in order to get the shapes you want. So, you know, that still works. You know, we come in here probably 0.5. The remesher's a little slower, but you know, that versus the remesh, this is a little cleaner. You know, you're probably not going to have as many, you know, bad faces and things like that. So I'll stay with the remesher. I probably should switch this to be a remesher over here too. So, you know, take a look at what this does on. Oh. So with this one, then we could, you know, reduce this size a little bit to 7. You know, something like that. So now that remesh does a pretty good job. If we get rid of this blur, right? This blur is probably a bit extreme on this, but again, you can always come back and fix that later. So now we've got, you know, a nice little setup here. We probably are gonna increase our P scale on this one to 0.45 so we get a little bit bigger, you know, snow. So it just reads a little better. There we go. So I'm pretty happy with that. So that's now my kind of my two different snow setups. I jump back out to the stage, and then we can just layer these in. So we can put another variant on this set here where we would add. We're going to add. We can do a separate. So instead of model, I guess we could do. We'll do this. We're going to do. What are these? This is bringing that whole tree. What I want to do is I just want to put that over the top. So we're going to do let's try this. We're going to do a sop import. And we'll start with this snow low. And we'll unpin this so we can kind of see what this is doing. We really want this to be under our geo. So right now we've got to go through and clean all this up. Let's quickly do that. So let's come in here and let's go. Okay, so we just need to create a name attribute. Let's make sure we don't have a ton of extra stuff. We don't. That's great. So under name, we're going to go ahead and say, we'll try to build this in the way that it's going to work correctly with what the setup that it's looking for is. So it merges in nicely. So render, and we're going to call this snow. Let's start with that. So render snow, what's this looking for? This is geo render, so not exactly what I want. And then we'll put this under geo. Okay. Okay, so we're adding this, you know, the name here, and we just want it to match. So render snow. We're going to come back up to the stage. So we've got geo, render, snow. Then under here we have asset geo render. And so if we use a graphed branches node, we should be able to plug this in. And so this comes in, and then we're going to drop this in. And so there, we don't want that sop import, and that's because that's doing that. So we don't want this to have geo either. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to change this to render, and we're going to come back to our snow, and we'll change it just to snow. We'll ditch that, you know, thing again. This is us trying to build like hierarchy, right? And it's not like Maya where you just drop stuff wherever you feel like it, which is sometimes really nice. But so now we look here and we've got render, and now we've got this graph stages, so we end up with render. Oh, yucky you! You just wiped out my. My original stuff. So let's see here. The other thing that we can do is, instead of using a graphed, is we could just put this in line like this. Right? The idea that this is just now joining this, but this is now outside. So this is where you would need this to be under asset geo render. So there, that works. That's probably the easiest. I don't love that it changes those from components. Let's see here. Add as reference just transforms of input hierarchy. I would love for that to leave that alone, but we'll deal with that for now. You probably could come in here and somewhere in these guys, the geometry handling, you know, primitive definitions, primitives, agents, yeah, so. Okay, so this technically, right, so if we bring this in like this now, we should have this is under low. See, this is not exactly what we want. We want to be able to do maybe this, or we probably actually have to just copy this and paste it and change this geo variant to be snow, right? Low snow. This is probably the fastest and easiest way to deal with this. So we can see that's what that is. Then we come in and we can change this to be low snow, and then the snow shows up here. And then we'll make a material USD builder. I'm not going to worry about any textures for right now. Base color, that works fine. And we're going to go ahead and make that assignment. So we'll grab this snow. Now, one thing I've been wondering is if we don't set a variant name, does it just attach to this no matter what? And then down here can be an edit. Let's try that. I want to try, because we've kept everything the same. So if we don't have a variant name, right, so that's shading. And then that's high. That's actually setting that. So, you know, so if we come back down to here, that's doing the right thing. If we have a couple of these, right? This one's going to be model. And so now we're just going to set this to be low. And there you go. So, you know, these two are now going to control. Oh, look, we can do that. Never mind. We can do this in one. So we're going to add one here. And this will be our model. And so we can now drive these together. So this is low snow. And now we can change that to low. We can change this to medium. We could have a medium snow as well. So this is kind of how we would do this, I guess. So we come here. This is going to be, grab the medium one, copy and paste. Now, in theory, instead of doing it this way, also here's also a difference. So going back to using our, instead of our external, we could use our internal SOP network, right, for both of these. And so let's come back here and change this back to our look dev being low snow. So we come in here. And instead of medium, this is going to be low. And then we can just add an additional here and go grab our low snow. Now, what we'll see when we jump out of this is, so if we come back out here, oh, that brought that in all correct. Because we were doing it before. So yeah, so this is doing the thing that we would want that to do. So this is pretty easy now to come into this and do really the same thing just on the medium. This is where it becomes maybe a little bit more beneficial, and you can kind of stack up these different, you know, groupings here. So we just add this and come in, export relative path, grab our medium snow. All right, so now we've got this great setup, and so we can just change this to be medium snow, and there you go. And you can see here that changed our setup because we haven't changed we haven't fixed the naming. So this is where we would come back in to our fur, and we make sure that that geometry is named the same. And the reason we care about that is because then, you know, this is breaks because now it's trying to make an assignment to geometry that does not exist because the geometry here has no name, so it's coming in as mesh or whatever that was. And so now if we look at this, we go back out to stage. This will now calculate properly. So that put the snow shader on there, and we'll see that the hierarchy, the hierarchy remained correct. So now we're going to go ahead and just let's render this out. So we've got our fur and we've got our different, you know, levels within this. So we're going to go ahead and just save this to disk, and then we're going to load this back in and look at how we can use this to then scatter. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just now bring in what we just wrote out. So we're going to use the asset reference node, and we're just going to browse to that. So if we come up to where we are, I think it wrote in the hip directory USD assets, and you could figure out where you want this all to go and live. So we're going to bring in this fur USD, and then we'll see, there it is. It comes in as an asset reference, geo materials. Let's see if this renders properly, because it doesn't look like it is. Oh, we've got to set some variances all. So we'll put down the set variant node, and really with this we're gonna set up our model, right? So we're gonna have a high. So let's make this the high. And so we should lose the snow, right? And I'm just going to put a null after this. We're going to call this high. And then we're going to have a medium and a low and a medium snow and a low snow. All right, so we'll call this medium. Call this low. Call this medium snow and low snow. Okay, and then for each of these, we'll just come and set, we want this to be our medium, we want this to be our low, we want this to be our medium snow, and we want this to be our low snow. So we can see that we need to also change on these, so these lower ones here, everything that's not the high, we need to come in and we need to add an additional, and so this is going to be on our look dev, and we seem to be missing our look dev variants. They did there too, so we're just going to try typing this in. So this was medium, low, and that really should just be on all of these. So something broke. Okay, so when we built this, we had this set up to not use a variant name, and so really this should just be our default variant, right? Should be what we use, and then this is doing our override as our high. So now when we're looking at this, our look dev should be either default or our look dev should be high, right? And that works better. So we're going to go ahead and just save this to disk again and give that a second. Because really the only thing that has a change in this is our high needs that, you know, that material assignment change. So we'll reload here. So we're gonna reload that file. Come and look at our medium here. We'll select all of these, and we want this to be default. That's going to render just fine now. And then we should be able to go and look at our low, our medium snow, and our low snow. So there we go. So now we have all these, you know, kind of different things set. So let's go ahead and let's create a camera. So we're going to create a camera, and I'll look through that camera. So whoop, it needs to be a part of our little scene here. So well, I'm going to make this my scene, and I'm going to put down a new object network here. We'll jump in here, and we're going to put down a height field. So we're going to go ahead and put down a height field. We're going to go inside this height field. We'll do a height field noise. Great. And then we'll do a height field mask by feature. And we're going to do based on slope. Flip this around to be linear, reverse this, something like that, and then height, we'll compute the range, linear, flip this around. Something like this. And now we can take this and we'll use the height field flatten. Let's say flatten to value. And then we can set this to be, you know, whatever. Obviously this is lower than it was. So we should, before this, we should do a height field remap. And one of the ways I like to do this is I like to use the bounding box. I think this works, the bounding box of itself. And we'll say d y min. Great. Copy, paste, and this is going to be dy max, and then we're going to copy this parameter, paste relative reference, copy this parameter, paste relative reference, and so right now it's not doing anything. And then we're going to take this and we'll copy it again, and we're going to come in here and we're going to subtract that value. So we'll paste relative reference, and we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to subtract, paste relative reference. Okay, so what that did was it moved this whole thing to be at, you know, at 0. So if we look at this, its lowest point is at 0, and then you know, it goes from there. So now we can use this height field flatten. We can either just bring this up like so, or maybe to average height, flatten to value, flatten to slopes. This flatten to slopes is interesting. It tries to do something smart, and maybe that's fine. Maybe we're content with that. Yeah, that's fine. Flattens that out a little bit. And then we'll do just a quick height field erode. We don't even really need to do this, but it's fun. Give that a second. All right, so we get kind of this, you know, little gardens. Okay, so now scattering in this space is going to be interesting. It really is going to be about creating some rules that define where these different assets are going to land. So right now, I'm just going to use a height field scatter node, just in general, and we're going to branch this off one side, and then I'm going to use a height field convert over here, and we'll put a name on this, and we'll just call this mountain. We'll call it terrain, and we'll put a null. Say out. Terrain geo. So let's come back out to our stage. We're going to bring that in. So we're going to use a lop import, or sorry, sop import, lop dop sop clop hop chippity chop, all that fun stuff. All right, so we want this, none of these guys do we care about. It's in this ObjectNet 1, it's in ObjectNet 2, height field, out terrain, export relative reference. So here's how it comes in, sop import, instead of OS, we're gonna go ahead and call this, we'll call this geo. And we could probably call it terrain also. Terrain. I spelled that wrong, but that's all right. Terrain, geo, terrain. Haha. We'll plug this in like so. So now we're gonna look through camera 1. We're gonna lock it, and let's find our kind of our angle here. Come down to one of these areas, something like this. So we're kind of down in it. Right. So something like that. Let's go check out our trees. So we'll jump down inside. We'll take a look at this scatter that we have. And it's just going to do a ton of stuff, right? So I'm going to plug in this second, and that'll use the mask then to kind of limit that to how many trees we have. This is like a bazillion trees. So I'll also do a height field mask noise node. And now I can just take this, and instead of add, I'm going to multiply, and then we can kind of figure out, you know, what the thing needs to be. Look through here. That reduces those number of points. And I often will use this by density instead of by coverage. I find it's a little more controllable. You know, it feels a little more straightforward. So we're going to do something like this. And now remember, really all we care about here are these points. So I'm going to go ahead and do a blast. And I'm going to keep our points. Actually, we'll do this. We'll use a delete. And we'll say keep points. Now when we do this, it will leave a point for our volumes. And so in that case, we're also just going to put down a delete node again, and we can come in here and say delete selected points. And oh, did we lose the attribute? Oh, because they lost their primitive attribute for their name. So we'll say at tag equals star. So you see that got rid of those points. So got rid of those. So now it's nice and clean. So this is just our trees. And now we need to determine how it's going to figure out what it wants to bring on. And that is going to be based on those names that we've created. Right? So if we come into here and we take a look at each of these trees that we've laid out, they're coming in as asset reference. And we need to move these now so each one is under its own thing. So this is where probably breaking this oh, look at that. We can do it here. I'm going to change this. So we're going to essentially do the same thing that we did on the other. So this is going to be for our variant type. We'll do model. And so this will be model high. And so this just does what it's supposed to do. So it's going to plug in here. And so we will call this fur underscore high. Copy and paste this one. And now we'll be able to change. Did this pick up the right? It did. So I picked up the right shader. So we'll leave it as it is. And then this one is going to be the look dev instead of, for this one, instead of high, this will be our default look dev, and then our model will just now move through these. So we'll say, let's start with medium. Right, so we're going to be able to just get rid of all of these. All right, so that's our medium. Great. And so this is going to be for medium. This is going to be our fur low. So going to be fur medium snow. This is going to be our fur low snow. All right, so now we can just merge these all together. And this is going to create, you know, we've got our different trees here. So now we come back to our points, and this is what we want to scatter onto this setup, right? So we'll go back to our camera here. So here's our camera. So we're going to go ahead and put down an instancer. And from this instancer, we're going to plug in these prototypes. And we want to use an external sop. And so we're going to go point at that directory where that lived. So, oh, we haven't made a null for it yet. So I'm going to hit out and say accept. And I'm going to say out. We'll call this scatter points. Obviously, that doesn't exist right now because we're going to go in and make it. So we'll put a null right here. And we're going to call this out scatter points. Okay, let's go back to our stage. And right now, the way this would work is it's going to just grab and at random, it's going to slap those trees on there. So if we come down here to options, it's saying random, which I guess is kind of okay. So, you know, we can plug this in here so we get our terrain in here and go back and look through our camera. We've got one right in our face. So let's take our camera and move it. So let's lock our camera. We're just gonna go something like this, and maybe even take our camera's view and make this like a 28, something like that. These are huge trees. I'm gonna go like this. Okay, so you can see here we've got a high tree right here, and then we've got low. So how do we control this? How do we make this work? Well, we really don't want randomized. We want to use special attributes. So we're going to go ahead and use a name attribute so that way it pulls in the right thing. So right now, if we now take a look again, it's pulling in nothing but the high resolution tree. So but we still want to be able to kind of utilize this to our advantage. So let's go back in. We're going to switch to our camera here. And let's make this something that's usable. So we're jumping side. We'll come in here, and now on our height field, we can utilize this, and we can also go to, let's go to our object level. We're going to use a LOP import camera, and we'll go get that camera. Camera 1. There we go. That's strange that that's where it's landing, but all right, I'll believe you. We'll come here like this. So a couple things, you know, we can do our standard stuff on this is we can come in and say, great, I really want this to not match the normals of the terrain. That'll make them stand up, right? I'll randomize it up a little bit and I'll rotate them. But now what we want on these points is we want to make sure that we have a name attribute that allows us to control this. So we're going to go ahead and use, I'm going to do an attribute delete real quick, and I'm going to clean up a few things on this because we don't want to send out normals, and we don't want to send out UVs because that will transfer onto our objects and wreck their UVs, and so the textures won't load on properly. So we'll let the rest of this, we don't care about footprint or fall off. We can use these masks, right, to figure stuff out, so we'll leave those on there. So I'm going to leave the rest as it is. Vertex, and we'll get rid of all those guys. We don't need any of that stuff. Transferring. Okay. So the reason, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to put down an attribute VOP, and I'm going to take my point position, and I'm going to do a length. Oh, sorry, distance, I think is what I want. A distance from each point, and then I want to give it a constant, and this will be a 3D float, and I want to be able to link this. So I'm going to come back out to the stage, and I'm going to grab my camera here, and I'm going to copy its transform. So copy this parameter, and now I'm going to go back to that attribute VOP, and I'm going to paste this as a relative reference. And so now that gives me that point of that camera. And so from this, if we just plug this into our CD here, not sure why we didn't go back here, height field. And we can see the color is white on all of these. And that's because as it goes away, it's just getting hotter and hotter. We can see our color values are getting really intense. And so what I want to do is I want to now remap this, right? So we're going to put a, we could do a fit range, anything is fine. So we'll do that. We'll do a fit range, and we'll put our value in here, and then shift this. And what we're going to do is we're going to put our source max. If we took a look at that color before, you know, I think it was like something like 500 looked to be about a value. So you can see here that now we get this kind of distance moving away from where our camera is, and we can now use this to kind of control those attributes. So we could even move this, so right, so that's further out. So based on that distance, we get, you know, a certain fall off here. So maybe this is 600. Okay, so we're going to start with that. And instead of color, we're gonna do a bind export, and we're gonna call this cam distance dist. Okay, something like that. I don't want to pick that up. Okay, so we had told it we were going to use the name attribute. So let's put down name, and for default, let's just use our low as our default. So we're going to say fur underscore low is our default. So let's jump back out to the stage here and see what that did. And that should have grabbed, but it didn't. Let's go to GL. Did I get that right? Fur low. Fur low. Attribute name. Sop import. Let's look at this. I feel like that's cooking the wrong stuff. One thing we should be able to see is under prototypes, it's pulling them all. Oh, there is a little trick here. This is grabbing everything. You know, we can just, you know, tell it that we want fur low, and that's switched them all to fur low. It's strange that it's not rendering with the materials. All right, it just needed to be rerun here. But let's stick in our fur medium also. So fur medium, and let's just restart this render. I would expect this still to be using the low. Still using the low. Now let's revert this back to its default. So it's pulling in all of those. There's our high. There's our low. Medium snow, low snow, medium. Well, something's amiss here. Let's give it a different, instead of the name attribute, we can tell it to use any attribute that we want. You know, oftentimes we'll use tag, you know, because that's what gets generated. You see there's no tag attribute, so it kind of gets upset. So we'll stick with name. Let's see if we plug that back in. Does that name? Okay. Let's go look at this here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to move this, and the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to clean up our attributes before they go out. So we're going to delete non-selected, and what are the things that we need to make sure we have? We need to make sure that we have our p-scale. We need to make sure that we have our orientation, and we need to make sure that we have our name attribute, which this is set to primitive. That's why it didn't work. So we need to make sure we have our name attribute. So with these, this will now work correctly, and now we can use our setup here to figure out, you know, what gets what name. All right, so if we jump back to the stage now, we should see, if we restart this render, there we go. So it's using the low, which is what we would expect. And now let's go back. Okay. So from here, now we want to go through and say, great, let's define some rules based on these attributes. And so one of the things we can do is, and I like to use the attribute VOP because it just helps me to see. And so I'm going to come here and I'm going to use, I'm just going to use the position. So I'm going to use a vector to float. I could also bring in any attribute from this to kind of figure out where I want this to use, but I'm just going to use the normals here, and I'm going to use the position, and I'm going to use Y, and I'm going to say fit range, and we'll plug this into CD, and let's make sure we're viewing that. We are, and we're now going to look at this and say, okay, great, what's our max Y is 77 and our lowest is 8. So let's make our source max is going to be, let's make it 35, and our source min, let's make that 30. And we're going to bind this and we'll, bind export. And we'll call this elevation. this attribute VOP here, and I'm going to say, let's look at that elevation. So now using this elevation node, I can determine whether I want something to have snow on it or not. So then I can use, instead of putting down a new name, I can use a wrangle to affect the existing name. So I can go like this, and I can say attribute wrangle, and I'll say if at elevation is greater than 1, then I can come in here and I can say string at name, and I'll say equals, and I'll do string at, I wonder if this works with strings. I'm going to try plus equals, and we're just going to say snow. And now what I want to look at here is come here and find my name attribute, which is right there. And it didn't seem to make a difference. Oh, sorry, not greater than 1. This should be greater than 0. And there we go. So now we have low and low snow, which is great because this is kind of the last thing that I want to do based on elevation. I'll get certain things, and I can modify that. So if this feels too like exact and horizontal, I can come in and I can say turbulent noise I can plug this in here, and I can do an addition, right, or a subtraction or a multiplication, however you want. Frequency in this, I'm going to make 0.001. So there you can see now it's kind of popping out. So we're turbulating that difference. And so if we broaden this up, make this 40, you're going to get more variation, where you're going to get stuff that pops in and out. And so we'll get some snow-covered stuff in there, which is great. So now the other thing that I want to do is I'm going to use my name here, and I'm going to say, great, based on, I don't want this connected anymore. I can copy this, and then I'm going to use my camera distance, so attribute name, and group, I'm going to use at cam, I think it was called dist is what we made, right? Cam dist. Let's take a look here. Cam dist, there you go. Where cam dist is less than 0.25, I want this to be for medium. And so now if I look at this here under my names, right, I should end up with fur medium. And there you go. So everything that's closer to the camera based on that cam dist, and we can look at what that heat map is. Anything that's less than 0.25 is going to get that medium tree, right? And then I could do another one of these, and I could say anything that is less than 0.1 is going to be high. And so let's leave that 0.1, and let's make this 0.3. And now let's take a look at what this does to our render. Okay, so our render, we still have trees right in our face, but you can see they switched to our high. We can see that we've got some snow-covered trees right behind us. Let's go in and make a quick adjustment to those, and let's reduce their size. So we're going to go to height field. All right, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to come into my scatter, and it defines a uniform distribution of p scale. So I can reduce these, or I can just put a wrangle in here. So as a part of this wrangle, I'm just going to say at p scale, excuse me, times equals, and we're going to say point, let's just 0.1. We're going to drop our scale by 0.1. So let's go back out to here. This is going to update, get a new render, and there we go. So it looks like we're catching basically all of our trees are getting the snow variant. We'll pin this, come back inside here, And let's make this 0.25 so we can see just a little bit better. So there's our high is right there. That you can see our medium, right, and our low. So we can see our different colors there. Now, as far as our snow goes, you know, I don't love how the snow is working. So instead of greater than 0, we'll say 0.5. All right, so then that starts to kind of move that back and, you know, capture those points now. So maybe we say this is greater than 0.9.5. Right, and that probably is just a problem with how we built our elevation here. So our remap needs to be something like 60. And there you go. So now as you start going up into these terrains, you're getting kind of your snowy trees. But we can see here, here's our high, here's our medium, and here's our low. And if we had proper lighting on this, you know, if we threw down a dome light, and we'll just tell this to be a lat long. We'll grab whatever dome light I've got. It doesn't look like I have any, so I'm going to go grab one real quick. We'll go to here. I don't want to use an HDR. I don't know if they fixed that problem yet, but it's usually really slow. And then I'll put one more light, and I'll make this a distant light. And -15. There we go. So, you know, already that feels pretty interesting, you know, as this goes back in space and distance. You know, you can see how this will work. And this is one tree. So, you know, you look here, you know, all of this, you don't feel so much the pattern. So if you get 3 or 4 different types of trees and do this same setup, right? So you mix in those other types of trees, this starts to look really real, really fast. And we're saving ourselves a bunch of memory. You know, it can still render on the graphics card because we're going into these things back here. Maybe our low tree is too close, right? So, you know, if that's the case, we can come back in here and, you know, on our wrangle where we were setting that distance, right? Which I think we were doing it actually on the name itself. So if cam distance is less than 3, so maybe we're going to make this less than 5, right? So you can see immediately that jumped back. So let's make this 6.5. So you see how much control we have over where this is happening, you know. So I just moved that back, so that blend line. So this is all mediums, and these are our hero trees, and maybe that's needs to be 2.5, right? Because we've got some stuff down here. So there you see that moved back, and this is how much control we now have over, you know, what this is doing. Be aware if your camera is animating, the trick that we used would cause these trees to pop as our camera's moving. And maybe you don't mind that, but you know, we can you know, obviously start with a hardened point. I just used that to get that point in. So, but you can see here how much, you know, we're able to do some cool things. You know, our light here. Let's crank up our exposure here. There we go. So, you know, you do something cool like this, it starts to really come together, and it's really easy to control, you know, and you know, come in and say, oh, this, you know, this is working, this isn't working. So, you know, again, I'll just come back here and cam distance, make this 3.75 to push those hero trees back into that light somewhat. You know, we'll just keep moving that back. And so whatever the needs are, you know, of the shot. And I would balance these so these textures feel more in alignment, which would be pretty easy to do, right? We can even do that after this has been done. We could go in and put a, you know, material edit on there and do a color multiply on that. But you can see we've got snowy trees up here. We've got our medium trees in here. So, all right, I hope this was helpful. So we, as a recap, we went through how to kind of take that initial tree that we built and how do we make an asset out of that? How do we work with variants, both model and material variants? And then how can we use those in a scatter system to be able to take advantage of setting up things so we have good depth of field, so we have a good fall off of LODs, so that we can control different types of variants and systems on there. So I hope this helped. If you have any questions, please go ahead and leave them in the comments. Like it if you felt this was beneficial to you, and thanks for watching.